$40. That's all you're here for, isn't it, darling? The receptionist, a woman whose smile seemed permanently affixed without quite reaching her eyes, purred the words, her tone heavy with patronizing pity. It cut through Jolene like a dull knife sharper than any explicit insult. A flush of mortification scalded Jolene's cheeks, tightening her throat until the sterile air of the Western Chicago Plasma Donation Center felt suddenly suffocating. Her vision blurred at the edges, the fluorescent lights above buzzing into a hazy halo. But as her fingers instinctively clutched the worn leather of her purse, a flicker of defiance ignited in her gut. A silent, burning promise that the worth they dismissed wouldn't stay hidden forever, unaware that the real secret weapon flowed undiscovered through her very veins. The clipboard felt impossibly heavy in Jolene's trembling hands. Its pristine white forms mocked the chaos swirling inside her. "Fill these out completely," the receptionist had instructed, her voice flat, devoid of genuine warmth. "Make sure to check any boxes for high-risk behaviors or medical conditions. When you're done, take a seat until we call your name." Jolene nodded, mute, retreating to an empty corner of the waiting room as if seeking refuge from judgment. The blue vinyl of the chair groaned beneath her as she sank into it. The sound amplified in the hushed, expectant silence. She stared at the forms, her name. Jolene Bennett, a stranger on the page. Age, 53. Current address. She hesitated, her pen hovering, then scrawled her sister Beatrice's address. 6 months ago, she would have written the penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, its panoramic views of Lake Michigan, a testament to a life she now barely recognized. 6 months and a lifetime ago, around her, a tableau of quiet desperation and nonchalance unfolded. College students, young and vibrant, scrolled through phones, exchanging parts of themselves for beer money. An elderly man in the corner dozed, his head tipped back, mouth slightly agape. A young woman in colourful scrubs, likely coming off a night shift, filled out her own forms with practiced, weary efficiency. All of them here to trade a part of their living essence for cash. The stark difference was that for them, this seemed routine. For Jolene, it felt like an elaborate masquerade. She was an imposter in her carefully pressed blouse, the last remnant of her former wardrobe, saved for jogging clothes that never materialized, just for Plasma. She whispered to herself the words. A desperate pair. Her thumb clicking her pen repeatedly, the sound of a nervous tap. Just $40 for Celeste's medication. Her daughter Celeste's asthma had flared badly since they lost their life insurance. The inhaler cost $60, and Jolene had exactly $22.47 in her checking account. She'd spent the morning calling every pharmacy in the city, searching for the lowest price, but there was no way around it. Celeste needed her medication, and Jolene was out of options. She filled out the medical questionnaire with meticulous honesty. No recent tattoos, no travel to malaria-endemic countries in the past 6 months. A first in decades, she used to coordinate events around the globe. No history of drug use, no. Had she recently been in prison? No. Have you ever fainted during a medical procedure? She checked no, though a part of her considered checking yes, just to have someone attend to her a bit more carefully. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch, a peanut butter sandwich at Beatrice's kitchen table, while her sister was at work, the lowest moment of a day, filled with low moments. Jolene Bennett, the voice belonging to the young woman in colourful scrubs, jolted her. Eleanor Vance, her name tag read. She stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, a kind, open face that immediately put Jolene slightly at ease. Jolene gathered her purse and followed Eleanor through to a small screening room, equipped with a blood pressure cuff and a scale. First-time donor, Eleanor asked, gesturing for Jolene to sit. Is it that obvious? Jolene attempted a smile, a brittle curve of her lips. We remember our regulars. Eleanor said, gently wrapping the cuff around Jolene's arm. I'm Eleanor. I'll be handling your intake and initial screening today. Eleanor looked to be in her late 20s, radiating a warm, gentle efficiency as she took Jolene's vitals. When she wrapped a tourniquet around Jolene's arm to check her veins, she let out an appreciative whistle. You have amazing veins for donation, she said, her smile genuine. This is going to be super easy. Some folks we have to hunt and prod, but yours are right there saying hello. At least some part of me is still functioning properly, Jolene muttered, before she could stop herself. A flash of her old sharp wit escaping despite her despair. Eleanor gave her a curious look, but didn't pry. Instead, she prepped to take the preliminary blood sample, swabbing the crook of Jolene's arm with alcohol. Small pinch, she warned, and then slid the needle in. Jolene barely felt it. See perfect veins. You were made for this. The dark red liquid filled the small vial quickly. Eleanor labelled it and set it aside, then prepped a second tube. Just need to check a few basic levels before we proceed with the full donation. As Eleanor worked, Jolene found herself studying the donation centre more carefully. The walls were lined with posters about saving lives, community service, and the scientific benefits of plasma donation. Nothing about the $40 that had brought her, and likely most others, here today. All done with this part? Eleanor said, placing a cotton ball over the tiny puncture and bending Jolene's arm up. I'll run these quick tests, and if everything looks good, we'll get you set up for the full donation. Should only take a few minutes. Jolene nodded, waiting patiently while Eleanor left with her blood samples. Through the thin walls, she could hear the quiet hum of machines and occasional beeps from the donation room next door. The reality of what she was doing, selling her plasma to buy her daughter's medication, hit her anew. How had Elegance by Jolene, the premier event planning business in Chicago for 2 decades, collapsed so completely? How had Sterling, her husband of 25 years, walked away so easily? You've ruined our lives, he'd said, packing his clothes while Jolene sat numb on their bed, as if the spoiled seafood that poisoned half the guests at the Lakeside Bank's anniversary gala had been a deliberate act on her part, rather than a catastrophic equipment failure. He'd packed left, and within a month moved in with his 32-year-old marketing coordinator. She was pulled from her bitter memories when the door opened again. Eleanor returned, but her expression had changed dramatically. She was pale, her eyes wide, clutching Jolene's blood sample tube as if it contained nitroglycerin. Mrs. Bennett, she said, her voice noticeably different. She stopped, composed herself. Would you mind waiting just a few more minutes? Dr. Alistair Finch needs to verify something with your sample. Is something wrong? Jolene's heart skipped, a cold dread coiling in her stomach. Am I sick? No, it's not like that. Eleanor's reassurance seemed genuine, though her eyes still held a hint of awe. It's actually... Just wait, please. Dr. Finch will explain everything. Before Jolene could press further, Eleanor hurried out again, still clutching the blood sample. 5 minutes stretched to 10, then 15. Jolene considered gathering her things and leaving. Clearly something strange was happening. Just as she decided to bolt, the door opened again. A man in his late 40s, wearing a crisp white coat, entered, followed by Eleanor. His expression was one of barely contained excitement. Mrs. Bennett, I'm Dr. Alistair Finch, medical director here. He extended his hand, which Jolene shook automatically. I apologize for the wait, but we needed to confirm something quite extraordinary about your blood. Extraordinary, Jolene repeated, certain she'd misheard. Yes. He sat on the rolling stool across from her, leaning forward, his gaze intense. Mrs. Bennett, you have what we call Rh null blood. It's often referred to as golden blood because it's the rarest blood type on Earth. There are only about 42 known people worldwide with this blood type. Jolene stared at him, certainty replaced by utter disbelief. I'm sorry. Your blood lacks all rhesus antigens. It's universally compatible with any other rare blood type. His voice contained an almost reverential quality. To find a new Rh null donor is, well, it's like discovering a unicorn. As Jolene struggled to process this information, a sharp series of beeps came from Dr. Finch's pocket. He pulled out a pager, glanced at it, and his eyebrows shot up. "Mrs. Bennet, would you excuse me for just a moment? This is urgent. I'll be right back to explain everything in more detail." He left the room in a rush, leaving Jolene alone with Eleanor, who was still looking at her like she'd sprouted wings. "What does this mean?" Jolene asked her, her voice a reedy whisper. "I just came for $40. Eleanor smiled, a strange mix of awe and sympathy in her expression. "I think, Mrs. Bennet, your day is about to change in ways you can't imagine." 20 minutes later, Dr. Finch returned with a third person in tow. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit who looked wildly out of place among the clinic's utilitarian furnishings. His presence exuded authority, like someone accustomed to rooms falling silent when he entered. "Mrs. Bennet, this is Silas Thorne," Dr. Finch said, his voice pitched slightly higher than before, a subtle deference in his tone. "He's a representative for the Thorne family and has come here specifically to speak with you." The suited man stepped forward, extending a manicured hand. "Mrs. Bennet? It's an honor. I apologize for this unconventional introduction, but time is of the essence." Jolene shook his hand automatically, feeling increasingly disoriented. "I don't understand what's happening." Dr. Finch gestured for everyone to sit. "Our system automatically logs rare blood types in an international database. When we confirmed your Rh null status, it triggered an alert. Mr. Thorne was already in Chicago on other business." "Fortuitous timing," Silas Thorne said with practiced smoothness. "Mrs. Bennet, are you familiar with Caspian Thorne?" The name rang a distant bell. The Swiss banker, Jolene mused. "I believe his family sponsored the International Finance Summit in Geneva a few years ago. My company had bid on the event, but lost to a local firm." "Precisely." Silas Thorne nodded, seemingly impressed. "Mr. Thorne is currently facing a critical health situation. He requires heart surgery that can only be performed with transfusions from an Rh null donor. His medical team has been searching for a compatible donor for weeks," Dr. Finch added. "Your blood type was the only match they found in the Western Hemisphere." Jolene looked between them, struggling to process what they were implying. "You want my blood for this billionaire's surgery? We're prepared to compensate you substantially for your assistance," Silas Thorne said, opening a slim leather portfolio. "The Thorne family is offering $3 million for your immediate cooperation. A private jet is standing by at the executive airport to transport you to Switzerland today." The room seemed to tilt slightly. $3 million? The procedure would require multiple donations over approximately 2 weeks, Dr. Finch explained. "It's intensive, but not dangerous, with proper medical supervisions, which you would receive at Switzerland's finest private clinic. $3 million. The figure hung in the air, almost absurd in its magnitude. 6 hours ago, Jolene had been panicking about finding $40 for her daughter's medication. Her business debts alone had topped $2 million. Everything she'd built over 20 years. Gone in a single disastrous night. And now this stranger was offering to erase it all because of something in her veins she hadn't even known existed until today. "This is a joke, right?" she whispered. "I assure you, Mrs. Bennet, this is entirely serious," Silas Thorne said. "Perhaps this will convince you." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and handed it to her. On the screen was a bank transfer authorization for $250,000. "A deposit," he explained. Her hands trembled as she handed back the phone. "I need to call my daughter." Eleanor quickly led Jolene to a private office with a phone. Celeste answered on the second ring. "Mom, is everything okay? Did you get the money for the inhaler?" "Celeste, something incredible just happened." Jolene's voice shook as she explained the situation as best she could. There was a long silence after she finished. "Mom, this sounds insane," Celeste finally said, her voice laced with youthful skepticism. "Like organ trafficking or something." I verified Dr. Finch's credentials. Jolene assured her, having insisted on seeing his medical license before making the call. "And the Thorn Banking Group is legitimate. I catered an event for one of their partner firms years ago. So you're going to Switzerland today. If I do this, we can pay off all the debt. You can go back to school. We can start over." Another pause. What's the alternative? Jolene considered this. If she walked away, she'd still be homeless, unemployed, and desperate for $40. Her daughter would still be working retail instead of finishing her architecture degree. "I don't think there is an alternative, honey." "Then go," Celeste said firmly. "But promise you'll stay in constant contact and have everything in writing before you agree." After hanging up, Jolene requested time to review the contract Silas Thorne had produced. Years of negotiating catering contracts had taught her to read fine print meticulously. The agreement was comprehensive. The sum, the medical protocols, accommodations, at a private clinic transportation. She insisted on several modifications, a detailed schedule of donations, limits on volume per session, and an explicit right to halt the process if her health was compromised. Silas Thorne seemed surprised by her thoroughness, but acquiesced to her changes. "You're more astute than I anticipated, Mrs. Bennet. Until recently, I ran a multi-million-dollar company," Jolene replied evenly, her spine straightening with a flicker of her old confidence. "This may be unusual business, but it's still business." 3 hours later, Jolene found herself ascending the steps to a private Gulfstream jet, carrying only her purse and a small overnight bag hastily packed from Beatrice's guest room. Eleanor had hugged her goodbye, slipping her personal number and extracting a promise to let her know she was safe. As the plane taxied for takeoff, Jolene stared out the window at Chicago's skyline growing smaller. Somewhere in that grid of buildings was the luxury apartment she'd lost, the office where she'd built her company, and the life she'd thought defined her. "Mrs. Bennet, can I offer you something to drink?" A flight attendant appeared at her side. A study in quiet discretion. "We have a full meal service prepared for the flight to Zurich. Just water for now, thank you." Her stomach was too knotted to consider food. Across the aisle, Silas Thorne worked on his laptop, occasionally making calls in fluent German and French. From snippets, Jolene overheard that Caspian Thorne's condition had stabilized enough for surgery, but they were in a race against time. As the plane leveled at cruising altitude, Jolene pulled out her compact mirror and studied her reflection. She looked like the same Jolene Bennet, the silver strands in her dark hair that she'd finally stopped dyeing last year, the fine lines around her eyes that Sterling had suggested she do something about, the stubborn set of her jaw that her father always said she'd inherited from him. Nothing about her suggested she carried something so rare and valuable inside. "Mrs. Bennet." Silas Thorne called, interrupting her thoughts. "Dr. Theron Dubois. Mr. Thorne's personal physician would like to speak with you via video conference to explain the medical procedure in detail." As she moved to join him, a strange calm settled over her. 24 hours ago, she was worthless, abandoned by her husband, a failed businesswoman, a burden on her sister. Now she was racing across the Atlantic because her blood could save one of the wealthiest men in Europe. The irony wasn't lost on her. After losing everything external that she thought defined her value, it turned out her true worth was something she'd been carrying in her veins all along. The private clinic, perched on the edge of Lake Geneva, looked more like a luxury resort than a medical facility. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured the stunning panorama of alpine mountains reflecting in crystal waters. Her suite, and it was a suite, not a hospital room, featured a separate sitting area. A marble bathroom, larger than Beatrice's entire guest room, and a private balcony with a view that would have cost thousands per night in her former life. She'd barely settled in when a soft knock announced the arrival of her medical team. Dr. Theron Dubois was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an academic air. He was accompanied by two nurses who exuded the quiet efficiency that defined Swiss healthcare. "Mrs. Bennet, welcome to Clinique des Alpes." Dr. Dubois said, his English precise with only the faintest German accent. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Quite," Jolene replied, still adjusting to this surreal transition from desperate plasma donor to VIP patient. "Though I'm eager to understand exactly what I've agreed to." Dr. Dubois nodded approvingly. "Of course, transparency is essential." He gestured to the sitting area where the nurses were already setting up equipment for what appeared to be a preliminary examination. Over the next hour, Dr. Dubois explained the procedure in meticulous detail. Caspian Thorne suffered from a rare congenital heart defect that had recently deteriorated, requiring urgent surgery. The procedure was complex and would require multiple blood transfusions. But the real challenge was his immune system's hypersensitivity. Any blood except Rh null would trigger a catastrophic reaction. "Your blood is quite literally the difference between life and death." For Mr. Thorne, Dr. Dubois concluded, "We will require several donations before surgery and potentially more during his recovery phase." As he spoke, the nurses took her vitals, drew blood samples, and performed a comprehensive health assessment. Jolene submitted to their tests, watching with detached curiosity as they handled her blood samples with extraordinary care, labeling them with color-coded systems she didn't recognize. "When will the first donation take place?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, if your tests confirm you're in suitable condition," Dr. Dubois replied. "We've designed a nutrition and hydration protocol to optimize your recovery between donations." He handed her a leather-bound folder. "Your complete schedule, dietary guidelines, and supplementation regimen are detailed here." After they left, Jolene stood on the balcony watching twilight settle over Lake Geneva. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine from the surrounding forests. She tried calling Celeste, but it went to voicemail. Her daughter would be at work now. Instead, Jolene sent her photos of the clinic and a detailed update on the medical plan. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text, just as she was finishing. To her surprise, it was from Sterling, her first contact from him in months that wasn't through lawyers. "Jolene heard rumors you're in Switzerland for some medical procedure. Are you ill? Should I be concerned?" The message was so perfectly Sterling phrased as concern, but undoubtedly motivated by self-interest. Had news about her rare blood condition already leaked to the press, or had he somehow tracked her sudden international travel? She typed and deleted several responses before settling on, "Not ill. Taking care of business. No need for concern." His reply came immediately. "We should talk when you return. I've been doing some thinking about our situation." Jolene laughed out loud, the sound echoing across the empty suite. "I bet you have," she muttered, leaving him on red. The man who told her she'd ruined their lives, who emptied their joint accounts before she even knew what was happening, who moved in with his 32-year-old marketing coordinator while she was still reeling from the collapse of her business. That man suddenly wanted to talk, now that she might have access to millions. A knock interrupted her bitter reminiscence. When she opened the door, she found Silas Thorne holding a garment bag. "Mrs. Bennet, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said. "Mr. Thorne has requested your presence at dinner if you're feeling up to it." "Mr. Thorne is here?" she asked, surprised. "I assumed he'd be in intensive care." "He's in the private wing," Silas Thorne explained. "Against medical advice, he insists on meeting the woman whose blood will save his life. The dinner will be brief and carefully monitored by Dr. Dubois." He handed her the garment bag. "We took the liberty of providing appropriate attire, as we understood your travel arrangements were hastily made." Inside was an elegant black dress that looked suspiciously her size, along with shoes and a simple pearl necklace. The presumption might have offended her once, but pragmatism overrode pride. She hadn't packed anything suitable for dining with a billionaire. 90 minutes later, Jolene was escorted to a private dining room where Caspian Thorne awaited. Her first impression was of a man whose physical frailty contrasted sharply with his commanding presence. Tall and gaunt, with deep-set eyes that evaluated her with unsettling intensity, he rose slowly as she entered, leaning slightly on an ornate walking stick carved from dark, polished wood. "Mrs. Bennet?" he said, his voice surprisingly strong, though carrying a faint tremor. "Please, join me." He gestured to the chair across from him at a small table elegantly set for two. A nurse stood discreetly in the corner, monitoring his vital signs remotely on a tablet. "Mr. Thorne." Jolene acknowledged, taking the offered seat. "I must admit this isn't how I expected my day to unfold when I woke this morning." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Nor did I anticipate meeting the woman whose veins hold the key to my survival." He poured water from a crystal carafe, its facets catching the candlelight. "Tell me what circumstances led you to that donation center in Chicago today?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "I needed $40 for my daughter's asthma medication." He raised an eyebrow. $40? That seems a remarkably small sum to drive someone of your apparent quality to sell their plasma. Jolene bristled slightly at his assumption, even if it was accurate. 6 months ago, I owned a successful event planning business, a penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, and thought I had a solid marriage. Life can change quickly, Mr. Thorne. Indeed it can. He agreed, studying her with renewed interest as servers silently appeared with their first course. What happened? Perhaps it was the surreality of the situation or simple exhaustion. But Jolene found herself telling him the unvarnished truth about the catastrophic equipment failure that poisoned half the guests at the Lakeside Bank Gala. The lawsuits that followed the supplier who declared bankruptcy, leaving her liable, and finally Sterling's abandonment when their assets evaporated. "So this morning I needed $40 I didn't have." Jolene concluded, realizing she'd barely touched her food during this recounting. "And now I'm dining in Switzerland with a man prepared to pay millions for my blood. Life is nothing if not unpredictable." Caspian Thorne listened without interruption, his expression inscrutable. When Jolene finished, he was quiet for a moment before responding. "Do you know what I find most interesting about your story, Mrs. Bennet?" he asked, finally his gaze piercing. "What's that? You've lost everything external. Your business, your home, your husband. Yet you still carry within you something of extraordinary value that no one can take away." He gestured toward her arm where the tiny mark from this morning's blood test was barely visible. "There's a profound metaphor there, don't you think?" Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment, Jolene felt seen in a way she hadn't in years, perhaps even during her marriage. This stranger, this billionaire fighting for his life, had distilled her situation to its essence in a way that both disarmed and disturbed her. "I suppose there is," she agreed quietly, though she'd trade metaphorical profundity for her daughter's college tuition in a heartbeat. He laughed, then a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him before a slight grimace crossed his features. The nurse immediately stepped forward, but he waved her away. "I believe we'll get along well, Mrs. Bennet," he said, composing himself. "And I suspect our arrangement may benefit us both in ways neither of us yet understands." The first donation took place the following morning in a state-of-the-art room that resembled a spa more than a medical facility. Jolene reclined on a heated leather chair as Dr. Dubois' team prepared their equipment with choreographed precision. The process was similar to standard blood donation, but with significantly more monitoring equipment and 2 nurses attending to her at all times. "We'll be taking 1 unit today," Dr. Dubois explained, checking the catheter in her arm. Your comfort and safety are our priority, Mrs. Bennet. If you experience any discomfort, please alert us immediately." Jolene nodded, watching her dark red blood flow through the tube and into a specialized collection bag. The rich crimson liquid that had been worthless to her yesterday was now being handled like liquid gold. "What makes my blood so special?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I understand it's rare, but what exactly is different about it?" Dr. Dubois adjusted his glasses, seemingly pleased by her interest. "Most people have rhesus antigens, protein markers, on their red blood cells. You have none. Your blood lacks all 61 possible rhesus antigens, making it compatible with any blood type in emergency situations. More importantly for Mr. Thorne's case, your blood won't trigger the severe immune response that would occur with standard transfusions. And no one in his family is a match. Blood type isn't simply inherited like eye color," he explained. "Rh null is caused by a specific genetic mutation. The odds of finding it in his family were negligible." The donation took less than 15 minutes, but Dr. Dubois insisted Jolene remain for observation for 2 hours afterward. A chef delivered a gourmet meal rich in iron and proteins, along with fresh pressed juice and mineral supplements. The level of care was extraordinary, a stark contrast to the assembly line approach she'd expected at the Chicago Donation Center. When she returned to her suite, she found a small gift box waiting on the coffee table with a handwritten note from Caspian Thorne. "A token of appreciation for today's contribution, the first of many, I hope. C.T." Inside was a delicate platinum bracelet with a single ruby charm, simple but elegant and undoubtedly expensive. She set it aside, unsure about the propriety of accepting such a gift, and called Celeste. Mum Celeste answered immediately. "I was about to call you." "Are you okay? Did they take your blood yet?" "Just finished," Jolene assured her. "The procedure was easy, much more pleasant than I imagined the donation center would have been." She described the clinic and the meticulous care she was receiving. "That's good," Celeste said, but Jolene detected hesitation in her voice. "What's wrong, honey? Dad showed up at Aunt Beatrice's looking for you." Her tone hardened. "When Beatrice told him you were in Switzerland, he started asking all these questions about why and who you were with. He seemed, I don't know, calculating." Jolene sighed, unsurprised. "He texted me yesterday. Did he mention wanting to talk when I get back?" "Yes. He told Beatrice he'd been rethinking things and realized he'd acted hastily." "Can you believe that?" "Unfortunately, I can." Jolene moved to the balcony, staring out at the lake, a cold knot forming in her stomach. "Has anything about my blood condition hit the news?" "Nothing specific, but there was a small article about the Thorne Banking Group preparing for a major medical procedure involving their CEO. It mentioned flying in a critical medical resource from America. Maybe he connected the dots. Gavin had always been astute about following money. If he'd caught even a whisper of her potential windfall, he would reappear like a shark scenting blood. An ironic metaphor given the circumstances. Mum Celeste continued, her voice dropping. You wouldn't consider getting back together with him, would you?" "Absolutely not." Jolene said firmly the words. A concrete shield against the past. 25 years of marriage ended the moment he walked out. No amount of money changes that. After they hung up, Jolene spent the afternoon resting as instructed, flipping through Swiss magazines without really seeing them. Her mind kept returning to Caspian Thorne's observation, how she'd lost everything external, yet still carried something of extraordinary value inside her. The metaphor wasn't lost on her, but she couldn't help wondering, was her value now reduced to this biological quirk? Was she merely a resource again? This time for her blood, instead of her event planning expertise. A knock interrupted her brooding. Eleanor Vance, the nurse from Chicago, stood at her door, her familiar face a surprising comfort in this foreign environment. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" Jolene exclaimed. Eleanor smiled broadly. Dr. Finch arranged for me to join the medical team. Since I was the first to identify your Rh null status, they thought I might be helpful during the donation process. She looked around the suite, clearly impressed. Quite a step up from our clinic, isn't it? They settled in the sitting area, and Eleanor's presence eased some of Jolene's isolation. Eleanor explained that she'd specialized in rare blood disorders during her training, before financial necessity pushed her toward the steadier income of the donation center. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "It's a lot to process in 24 hours. It's surreal," Jolene admitted. "Yesterday I was desperate for $40, and today a billionaire gave me a ruby bracelet for 1 unit of blood." Eleanor's eyes widened. "He gave you jewelry?" Jolene showed her the bracelet still in its box. "Is that inappropriate? I haven't decided whether to accept it. It's unusual," Eleanor said carefully. "In normal medical practice, there are strict ethical guidelines about gifts between patients and donors, but nothing about this situation is normal." They were interrupted by Silas Thorne, who appeared with an update on the schedule. Her blood work showed excellent recovery, and they wanted to proceed with a second donation the following morning. The surgery was tentatively scheduled for 3 days later. "Mr. Thorne has also requested another meeting with you tomorrow evening," Silas Thorne added. "He found your conversation stimulating and believes reducing his stress levels will benefit his pre-surgical condition." "Is that medically sound, or is he using his condition to get what he wants?" Jolene asked bluntly. Silas Thorne's expression remained professional, but Jolene caught a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "In my experience, Mrs. Bennet with Mr. Thorne, those two things are rarely mutually exclusive." After he left, Eleanor gave Jolene a concerned look. "Just be careful about boundaries, Jolene. The power dynamic here is already complicated enough." She was right. Jolene was simultaneously invaluable and vulnerable. The literal lifeblood for a man accustomed to wielding enormous power, yet dependent on his financial rescue. She needed to navigate this strange relationship carefully. That evening, Jolene received another text from Sterling called Beatrice looking for you. "Why didn't you tell me about Switzerland? What medical procedure requires international travel? We should discuss this together as family." Jolene stared at the message, anger bubbling up from some deep reservoir she thought had run dry months ago. "As family," she said aloud to the empty room. The audacity was breathtaking. The man who'd emptied their accounts and moved in with another woman while she was still shell-shocked from losing her business now wanted to invoke family ties. She typed a reply, deleting and rewriting several times before settling on, "We're not family anymore, Sterling. You made that abundantly clear when you left. My medical decisions are no longer your concern." His response came immediately. "Don't be hasty, Jolene. People make mistakes. I've been thinking a lot about us lately." "I bet you have," she muttered, setting her phone aside without responding. She moved to the window, watching lights twinkle along the shoreline of Lake Geneva. Tomorrow they would take more of her blood. This substance that had suddenly transformed her from worthless to priceless in the eyes of the world. But its value had always been there unrecognized, flowing through her veins every day of her life. The realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. Whatever happened with Caspian Thorne, whatever Sterling was plotting, whatever the future held, Jolene carried her true worth within her and always had. By the third day, the clinic staff had settled into a routine around Jolene's presence. The morning nurses greeted her by name. The chef prepared her post-donation meals according to her preferences, and even Silas Thorne had softened his formal demeanor slightly. Jolene had donated 2 units of blood with a third scheduled for tomorrow, and her body was holding up well thanks to the meticulous care she was receiving. What she hadn't expected was Caspian Thorne's continued interest in her company. After their initial dinner, he'd requested another meeting and then another. Each conversation revealed more layers to this complex man, who held such power in the financial world, yet now found himself utterly dependent on a stranger's and biological quirk. "You didn't have to accept, you know," he remarked during their third meeting, a lunch in the clinic's private garden. Despite his frail appearance, he insisted on being outdoors whenever possible. "You could have named your price. Demanded 10,020,000. In my position, I would have paid it." Jolene considered this as she sipped her mineral water. "Perhaps that's why you're a banker and I ran an event company. Different instincts indeed." His piercing gaze studied her. "Though I suspect it's more than that. You accepted quickly, but you negotiated terms carefully. Medical safety protocols, schedule limitations, clear boundaries. You wanted fair compensation, not exploitation. That speaks to character." Jolene shrugged, uncomfortable with his analysis. Or perhaps just business sense. "My company may have failed, but I learned a few things in 20 years. Tell me about it," he said, surprising her. "Your company. What made it special before the incident?" No one had asked her about elegance by Jolene since its collapse. People either avoided the topic entirely or spoke of it in hushed, pitying tones. But Caspian's question held genuine curiosity. So Jolene found herself describing the business she'd built, from a one-woman operation in her apartment to a staff of 47 with corporate clients across the Midwest. "Our signature was personalization," she explained, a flicker of pride igniting in her voice despite herself. "We never used templates. Every event was built from the ground up, based on the client's vision and needs. We were known for solving impossible problems. The mayor once called us the Navy SEALs of event planning. If something seemed logistically impossible, we were the ones they called." Until the seafood incident, he noted not unkindly. Until then, Jolene agreed. One equipment failure, one bad night, and 20 years of reputation vanished. Caspian shifted in his chair, a slight grimace, betraying his discomfort despite his attempts to hide it. The business world can be merciless that way. One misstep erases 1,000 successes. "Is that what happened to you?" Jolene asked boldly. "A misstep." He raised an eyebrow, clearly unused to such direct questioning. "My condition is congenital, a birth defect, though it manifested serious symptoms only recently." "I meant with your family," Jolene clarified. "I've noticed no one has visited you. For someone preparing for life-threatening surgery, you seem remarkably alone." A shadow crossed his face. "My family situation is complicated. My ex-wife lives in Monaco with her third husband. My son manages our Asian operations from Singapore. They've been notified, of course, but they haven't come. They'll attend my funeral if necessary," he said, with surprising detachment. "Or the press conference announcing my recovery, should you and Dr. Dubois succeed." The casual way he referenced his possible death struck Jolene. "Doesn't that bother you? Being alone at a time like this?" He gestured around them at the private clinic. "I'm hardly alone. I have a full medical team staff attending to my every need, and now you, my golden-blooded savior. That's not the same as family." "Perhaps not." He examined her with renewed interest. "Yet you're hardly surrounded by loved ones yourself, Mrs. Bennett. Your daughter remains in Chicago, and from what you've mentioned of your sister, your relationship seems strained at best." The observation stung because it was accurate. Jolene changed the subject. "Is there anything you want to do before the surgery? Anywhere you'd like to go while you still can?" He seemed amused by the question. "You sound as though you're offering to fulfill a dying man's last wish." "I'm offering a distraction," Jolene corrected. "Sitting here counting down to surgery can't be good for your stress levels." To her surprise, he considered the suggestion seriously. "There is a small art gallery in the old town. They're exhibiting a collection I've been interested in seeing." "Then we should go," Jolene said impulsively. "If Dr. Dubois approves, of course." That afternoon, after considerable negotiation with the medical team, they set out for the gallery in Caspian's private limousine. A nurse accompanied them discreetly, monitoring his vitals via a small device he wore beneath his immaculate suit. The gallery had been closed to the public for their visit, another reminder of the power this man wielded even from his sickbed. The exhibition featured contemporary European artists exploring themes of transience and permanence, a subject that struck Jolene as almost too on the nose given their circumstances. Caspian moved slowly through the space, occasionally pausing to examine a piece more closely. Jolene noticed he was particularly drawn to the more provocative works, those that challenged conventional aesthetics or presented uncomfortable juxtapositions. "What do you see in this one?" he asked, stopping before a large canvas that appeared to Jolene's untrained eye as chaotic splashes of red against a dark background. "Honestly, it looks like a bloodbath," Jolene said without thinking. To her relief, he laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily transformed his austere features. "Precisely why I appreciate your company, Mrs. Bennet. No artificial analysis, no pretense." "Jolene," she said suddenly, "if we're going to be bound by blood literally, you might as well use my first name." "Jolene," he repeated as if testing the sound. "And I am Caspian." "Not Mr. Thorne?" she asked with mild sarcasm. "Only those who want something from me," he replied dryly. They continued through the gallery, their conversation flowing more naturally now. By the time they returned to the clinic, Jolene realized she'd spent the afternoon not thinking about Sterling's texts, her financial situation, or even the strangeness of her current circumstances. For a few hours, she'd simply been Jolene again, engaged, curious, present. Back in her suite, Jolene found 3 missed calls from Celeste and a text message that sent ice through her veins. "Dad showed up at my apartment. He knows about the Thorne situation. It's in the financial press now. Some article about rare blood donor saves banking mogul. He's talking about family interests and legal community property. Call me ASAP." Jolene called her immediately, her hands shaking slightly. "What exactly did he say?" "He's claiming that since you were still legally married when you made the agreement with Thorne, he's entitled to half of any compensation as community property." Celeste's voice trembled with anger. "He's consulted a lawyer, Mum." Jolene closed her eyes, the brief normality of the afternoon shattering around her. Of course Sterling would find a way to insert himself into this situation. Of course he would try to claim what was hers. "Did he threaten you?" she asked, sudden maternal protectiveness surging through her. "Not exactly," Celeste said. "He was trying to be charming, you know how he gets when he wants something. But when I told him to leave, he said I should consider my future, and how this money could benefit all of us as a family." The familiar manipulation tactics made Jolene's stomach churn. "I'll handle it," she promised her. "The divorce may not be finalized, but we have a signed separation agreement that clearly divides assets. He can't touch this." But even as she reassured Celeste, doubt crept in. The separation agreement had been signed before either of them knew about her golden blood or the compensation it would bring. Would that matter legally? After they hung up, Jolene sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with blood donation. The universe seemed determined to remind her that every silver lining came with a new cloud. She'd found an unexpected lifeline, only to have Sterling's grasping hands reaching for it. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor stood there, concern evident on her face. "Bad news from home?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "My ex, Jolene," explained wearily. "He's making noises about claiming half the Thorne money." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Some people really show their true colours when money's involved, don't they?" "Sterling showed his true colours months ago." Jolene replied, a bitter edge to her voice. "This is just the encore performance." The morning of Caspian's surgery dawned clear and crisp, the Alps razor-sharp against a perfect blue sky. Jolene had made her final pre-surgery donation the previous day and felt surprisingly strong thanks to the clinic's aggressive nutritional support and rest protocols. From her balcony, she watched a medical helicopter land on the clinic's roof, bringing, she presumed, the specialized surgical team that would perform the procedure. Her phone buzzed with the text from Celeste. "Thinking of you today. Let me know how everything goes with Mr. T's surgery." Jolene smiled at her daughter's thoughtfulness. Despite everything she'd been through, her education interrupted her stable life, upended her father's betrayal. Celeste still maintained her innate empathy. Jolene had done something right in raising her, at least. There had been no further contact from Sterling since she'd instructed the attorney Silas Thorne had arranged for her to send him a firmly worded cease and desist letter. Whether that would deter him remained to be seen, but for today, Jolene pushed those concerns aside. Today was about Caspian and the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A knock announced Silas Thorne, more formally dressed than usual in a dark suit and tie. "Mrs. Bennet Jolene," he corrected himself, adopting the more personal address Caspian had initiated. "Mr. Thorne has asked to see you before the surgery. Is that allowed?" Jolene asked, surprised. "I thought they'd be preparing him already." "They are Silas Thorne, confirmed." This is unorthodox, but he was quite insistent. Jolene followed him to the surgical wing where she was given sterile garments to wear over her clothes before being allowed into a preoperative room. Caspian lay on a gurney, various monitors attached to his lean frame, an IV already in place. He looked smaller, somehow more vulnerable, the hospital gown replacing his usual bespoke suits. "Jolene," he said when he saw her, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," Jolene replied, moving closer. "How are you feeling?" "Physically about as one would expect before having one's chest cracked open." His attempt at humor couldn't quite mask the tension in his voice. "Mentally. That's why I asked to see you." He gestured for her to come closer, lowering his voice so the nurse across the room couldn't hear. "There's a possibility I won't survive this." "The doctors seem very confident," Jolene began, but he cut her off with a small shake of his head. "They're excellent, and your blood has given me the best chance possible. But the reality remains. I'm 62, with a congenitally defective heart. The odds are significant." He paused, eyes locked on hers. "If things go poorly, Silas has instructions regarding your compensation. You'll receive the full amount regardless." "I wasn't worried about that," Jolene said truthfully. "I know. That's precisely why I felt the need to tell you." His hand moved slightly toward hers on the rail of the gurney, not quite touching. "In our brief acquaintance, you've shown me more genuine human connection than most people in my life. You came to a donation center to help your daughter, not yourself. You negotiated firmly but fairly. You've treated me as a person, not a bank account. These things matter to me." Jolene swallowed, unexpectedly moved by his words. "You're going to be fine, Caspian. And when you're recovered, perhaps you can use some of those billions to find more of us golden-blooded unicorns, so the next person in your situation doesn't have to scramble so desperately." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, already thinking like a philanthropist. He winced slightly. "Money changes people, Jolene. Be careful," says the billionaire banker. Jolene countered lightly. "Precisely." His expression grew serious again. "I wasn't always wealthy. I built Thorne Banking Group from a small regional operation into an international powerhouse. I've seen what money does to others and to myself." Before Jolene could respond, Dr. Dubois entered his expression, making it clear that their time was up. "We need to proceed, Mr. Thorne." Caspian nodded. "One moment." He turned back to Jolene. "Whatever happens, thank you for your golden blood, Jolene Bennet. It's worth far more than $3 million. "Then you overpaid," Jolene said lightly, trying to ease the sudden heaviness between them. "I suspect in the end we'll find I got quite a bargain." With that enigmatic statement, he nodded to Dr. Dubois, indicating he was ready. Jolene was escorted back to her suite, where Eleanor was waiting with a light breakfast and strict instructions for her to rest. "The surgery will take at least 8 hours," Eleanor informed her. "There's nothing to do but wait." Waiting had never been Jolene's strong suit. As an event planner, she was used to constant motion-solving problems, making decisions. Forced inactivity made her restless. After picking at her breakfast, she tried reading, then watching television, then scrolling through news sites on her tablet. Anything to distract from the strange anxiety she felt about Caspian's surgery. "You're really worried about him, aren't you?" Eleanor observed, bringing her tea mid-morning. "Is that strange?" Jolene asked. "A week ago I'd never heard of him. Now I'm pacing about like a concerned friend. It's not strange. You've literally given your blood to save his life. That creates a connection." "It's more than that," Jolene admitted. "We've talked a lot these past days. He's not what I expected." Eleanor gave her a knowing look. "Thorne's reputation in financial circles is pretty cutthroat. The Alpine Shark, some call him. I can see that side of him," Jolene acknowledged. "But there's more. Underneath all that power and control, he's just human facing his mortality alone, like you were when your husband left and your business collapsed," Eleanor observed quietly. The parallel hadn't escaped Jolene. Perhaps that explained the unexpected rapport between them. Two people accustomed to control, suddenly confronted with their own powerlessness. Around noon, Silas Thorne appeared with lunch and a brief update. The surgery was proceeding as expected, with no complications thus far. He seemed surprised by Jolene's evident concern. "You've developed quite an interest in Mr. Thorne's welfare," he noted. "Shouldn't I be interested in the outcome of a surgery that requires my rare blood type?" Jolene deflected. Silas Thorne studied her thoughtfully. "In my 15 years working with Caspian Thorne, I've rarely seen him connect with anyone the way he has with you. It's unexpected." "We're hardly friends," Jolene protested. "We've just had a few conversations while I've been donating blood." "Mr. Thorne doesn't just have conversations," Silas Thorne replied, his voice devoid of judgment. "Every interaction has a purpose." His words unsettled Jolene, suggesting an agenda behind Caspian's apparent openness. Was she being naive? Had their discussions been strategic rather than genuine? Her phone chimed with a notification, mercifully interrupting this uncomfortable line of thought. It was an email from her divorce attorney. "Sterling's lawyer has formally requested disclosure of the Thorne agreement as part of divorce discovery. We need to discuss strategy ASAP." A fresh wave of frustration washed over her. Even here, thousands of miles away, Sterling's grasping influence reached her. Jolene forwarded the email to the attorney Silas Thorne had arranged to handle the Thorne agreement, asking for her opinion on the divorce implications. The rest of the day passed in excruciating slowness. Jolene fielded a call from Beatrice, who seemed torn between concern and resentment over her sudden change in fortune. She spoke with Celeste again, reassuring her about her health, while carefully avoiding details about Caspian that might find their way back to Sterling. At 7 that evening, Dr. Dubois finally appeared at her door, still in his surgical scrub's exhaustion, evident in the lines of his face. "The surgery is complete," he announced. "Mr. Thorne has survived the procedure. And his prognosis?" Jolene asked, her heart pounding unexpectedly hard. "The next 48 hours are critical," Dr. Dubois said cautiously. "But we achieved everything we hoped to surgically. Your blood performed exactly as we needed it to. Without it..." He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. Jolene sank into a chair, surprising herself with the intensity of her relief. "When can I see him?" Dr. Dubois raised an eyebrow. "He'll be unconscious in intensive care for at least 24 hours. There's no need for you to..." "When can I see him?" Jolene repeated firmly. He studied her for a moment before relenting. "Perhaps tomorrow evening if his condition stabilizes briefly." After he left, Jolene stood at the window watching nightfall over Lake Geneva. The lights of the city glittering like earthbound stars. Caspian had survived the surgery. The first hurdle cleared. Why this mattered so much to her beyond the practical implications of their agreement was a question she wasn't quite ready to examine. Caspian remained in intensive care for 3 days. his recovery proceeding more slowly than the medical team had hoped, but without major complication. During this time, Jolene found herself in a strange limbo, no longer actively donating blood, but not yet released to return home. Silas Thorne explained that she needed to remain available for potential additional donations during Caspian's recovery phase, but Jolene suspected there was more to her continued presence at the clinic than medical necessity. On the fourth day, post-surgery, she was finally permitted to visit Caspian. He was awake, but heavily medicated, his usual sharp alertness dulled by painkillers and fatigue. Various tubes and monitors connected him to machines that beeped and hummed, tracking his vital functions with clinical precision. "Jolene," he said when he saw her, his voice a rasp of its usual resonance. "You're still here. Where else would I be?" Jolene replied, taking the chair beside his bed. "Someone has to make sure all that golden blood wasn't wasted." A ghost of his usual smile touched his pale lips. Always practical. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes. The beeping monitors, a strange counterpoint to the unspoken current between them. Finally he spoke again, each word clearly requiring effort. "I had a dream during surgery. You were there." "Was I planning an event?" Jolene asked lightly. "No." His gaze, though clouded by medication, held hers. "You were standing at a crossroads, holding something bright in your hands. You offered it to me, but then—" He frowned slightly, the memory slipping away. "I can't recall the rest." "Sounds like an anesthesia dream," Jolene said, oddly disturbed by his description. "Perhaps." He shifted slightly, wincing. "Or perhaps symbolic. You quite literally offered me your life force." For $3 million, Jolene reminded him, hardly a selfless gesture. "We both know it wasn't just about the money." His eyes drifted closed, fatigue overtaking him. Jolene sat with him until he fell asleep, troubled by his words. He was right, of course. Somewhere along this strange journey, the transaction had become something more complex than a simple exchange of blood for money. She'd begun to care about this man, his recovery, his future, his solitary existence despite his vast wealth. It was unexpected and slightly alarming. As Jolene left the ICU, she nearly collided with a tall, impeccably dressed Asian man who shared Caspian's sharp features and penetrating gaze, though softened by youth. "Mrs. Bennet, I presume," he said, extending his hand. "Darius Thorne, Caspian's son." Jolene shook his hand, noting his firm grip and assessing gaze. "You've come from Singapore, as soon as I could arrange it." A flicker of something, defensiveness perhaps, crossed his face. "Contrary to whatever my father may have implied, his family does care about his welfare." "He said very little about his family," Jolene replied diplomatically. Darius's expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he let it pass. "The doctors tell me your blood saved his life. Our family owes you a debt of gratitude beyond the financial compensation." There was something rehearsed about his gratitude that reminded Jolene of Sterling at his most professionally charming. She wondered how much this young man, who had clearly inherited his father's business acumen, if not his warmth, knew about her arrangement with Caspian. "I should let you visit your father," Jolene said, stepping aside. "Actually, Mrs. Bennet, I was hoping we might speak privately first." He gestured toward the waiting area. "There are some aspects of your arrangement with my father I'd like to discuss." Warning bells rang in Jolene's mind. Any discussions about my agreement should include Silas Thorne and the attorneys who drafted it. "Of course," he said smoothly. "I simply thought a preliminary conversation might be beneficial. My father, while brilliant in business, can sometimes be impulsive when his health is concerned." "Your father struck me as quite methodical," Jolene countered, "and I found Silas Thorne to be extremely thorough." Darius's polite smile tightened slightly. "Mrs. Bennet, my concern is simple. My father has developed a personal interest in you that extends beyond the medical necessity of your blood type. This could complicate matters when he's thinking more clearly. The implication was clear. He believed Jolene was somehow manipulating Caspian during his vulnerability. The suggestion stung more than it should have. Mr. Thorne, I have no designs on your father or his fortune beyond our existing agreement. Jolene met his gaze directly. I came here to donate blood and be fairly compensated for it. Any personal connection that developed was initiated by Caspian, not me. I meant no offense. He backpedaled, though his eyes remained cool and assessing. I'm simply looking out for family interests during a difficult time. I understand completely, Jolene replied, thinking of Sterling's sudden, renewed interest in family once money entered the equation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm due for a follow-up examination. That evening, Eleanor found Jolene on her balcony, staring out at the mountains as twilight painted them in shades of purple and gold. She handed Jolene a glass of wine, a small luxury, now that her donations were complete. You seem troubled, Eleanor observed. Is it Caspian's condition? Partly, Jolene admitted, and a rather tense conversation with his son. Ah, the prodigal son arrives. Eleanor leaned against the railing. He's been here less than a day, and already the staff is talking about him. Very demanding, very corporate. He thinks I'm taking advantage of his father's vulnerability. Jolene said the words, bitter on her tongue. Are you? Eleanor asked bluntly. Jolene turned to her, surprised. Of course not. Then why does it bother you what Darius Thorne thinks? Eleanor sipped her wine. Unless you care more about Caspian than you're admitting. The question hung in the air between them, uncomfortably precise. Did Jolene care about Caspian Thorne? The wealthy, powerful banker who had swept into her life on the back of a biological coincidence, the man whose blood money would resurrect her financial life, the patient whose recovery she found herself invested in beyond any practical consideration. It's complicated, Jolene finally said. Life usually is. Eleanor smiled sympathetically. Look, whatever is happening between you and Caspian or not happening, it's nobody's business but yours, not his son's, not Silas Thorne's, not even mine. There's nothing happening, Jolene insisted. Perhaps too quickly. We've just connected somehow. Found common ground despite our very different circumstances, if you say so. Eleanor's tone made it clear she wasn't entirely convinced. By the way, Silas Thorne mentioned they're planning to move you to the residential wing tomorrow. Caspian's stable enough that they don't need you quite so close at hand medically. The news should have been welcome. The residential wing was apparently even more luxurious than her current suite, with more independence and privacy. Instead, Jolene felt a twinge of disappointment at being moved further from Caspian. The thought was absurd. That makes sense, she said neutrally. Did he mention how much longer I'll need to stay in Switzerland? Another 2 weeks? Possibly 3, Eleanor replied. They want you available for any complications. Plus, there are some follow-up donations scheduled once Caspian is stronger. 2 more weeks in this strange bubble, suspended between her old life and whatever came next. 2 more weeks of conversations with Caspian, watching him recover, navigating the complex dynamics with his son and staff. 2 more weeks before she had to face Sterling and his legal maneuvers. Before she had to decide what to do with her unexpected wealth. Before she had to rebuild her life from the ground up. What will you do when you go back? Eleanor asked, as if reading her thoughts. Jolene took a long sip of wine. Considering. Start over, I suppose. Pay off my debts. Find a place to live, help Celeste return to school. And professionally. The question gave Jolene pause. She hadn't thought much beyond the immediate financial relief the Thorne payment would provide. Her catering and event business was irreparably damaged, not just financially, but reputationally. Starting over in the same industry would be an uphill battle at best. I don't know, she admitted. 20 years in one business doesn't prepare you well for a midlife career change unless you use what you've learned about crisis and recovery to help others navigate similar situations. Eleanor suggested, her eyes thoughtful. The idea resonated unexpectedly, echoing conversations Jolene had had with Caspian about transforming failure into opportunity. Before she could explore it further, her phone buzzed with a text from Silas Thorne. "Mr. Thorne is asking for you, if you're available. He seems quite insistent, despite medical advice to rest." Jolene showed Eleanor the message, and she raised an eyebrow. "Nothing happening, huh? He's probably just bored and restless," Jolene said, setting down her wineglass. "You know how terrible patients can be." "Oh, I do," Eleanor agreed with a knowing smile, especially when they only want to see one specific visitor. Jolene ignored her implication and headed back inside to change before returning to the ICU. Whatever was happening between Caspian and her, this unexpected connection, this mutual recognition of something she couldn't quite name, it deserved exploration, not denial. And if his son or anyone else had opinions about it, well, she'd survived the collapse of her business and marriage. She could certainly handle a disapproving heir to a banking fortune. The residential wing of Clinique des Alpes resembled a 5-star alpine resort, more than any medical facility Jolene had ever encountered. Her new suite featured a full kitchen, a living area, with a fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the mountains like a living painting. Under different circumstances, she might have reveled in such luxury, but her thoughts remained distracted, split between concerns about Caspian's recovery, Sterling's legal maneuvers back home, and her own uncertain future. Caspian was moved from intensive care to a private recovery suite on the same day Jolene transferred to the residential wing. Though still weak and requiring frequent monitoring, his natural authority reasserted itself quickly. Within days, he had established a modified work schedule, reviewing urgent banking matters via a secure tablet and conducting brief video conferences with key executives, much to Dr. Dubois's poorly concealed frustration. The man survived open-heart surgery less than a week ago, and he's already discussing international finance. Dr. Dubois complained when Jolene encountered him in the hallway. "Perhaps next time we should remove the workaholic tendencies along with the defective valve," Jolene laughed. "I suspect those tendencies are hardwired deeper than his cardiac issues." "Then you understand him well already," the doctor observed with a shrewd glance before continuing on his rounds. The comment lingered with Jolene as she made her way to Caspian's suite, for what had become their daily afternoon conversation, ostensibly to monitor her recovery as a donor, but in reality, a mutual respite from their respective situations. Today, she found him sitting up in a reclining chair rather than his bed, colour gradually returning to his gaunt features. "You look stronger," Jolene remarked, taking her usual seat beside him. "Appearances can be deceiving," he replied dryly. "But yes, progress is being made. Thanks in no small part to your golden contribution." "How are things with Darius?" Jolene asked, noting the stack of financial reports on his side table, clearly his son's doing. Caspian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Darius is being Darius, efficiently managing the family business, while simultaneously reminding me of my mortality and his readiness to assume control. He seems concerned about your welfare," Jolene offered diplomatically. "And about my relationship with you," Caspian added bluntly. "He took me aside yesterday to express concern that I might be, how did he phrase it, developing inappropriate attachments due to medical vulnerability." Heat rushed to Jolene's face. "He implied something similar to me. I apologize for my son's presumption. Darius sees the world primarily through the lens of risk management and asset protection." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Jolene detected a hint of regret beneath it. "A trait he inherited from me, I'm afraid." "You seem to have developed other perspectives," Jolene observed. "Nothing clarifies one's priorities quite like facing death." He adjusted his position slightly, wincing at the movement. "Speaking of clarity, I've been thinking about your situation upon returning to Chicago." The abrupt change of subject caught Jolene off guard. My situation, your ex-husband's legal maneuvering, your professional future, your daughter's education. He gestured to a folder on his table. I've taken the liberty of having Silas Thorne research some options. Jolene stiffened. I don't recall asking for assistance beyond our original agreement. Caspian studied her, his gaze sharp despite his weakened state. You're offended? I'm surprised Jolene corrected, though he wasn't entirely wrong. I'm capable of managing my own affairs. Of course you are. But why struggle unnecessarily when I have resources that might prove useful? He pushed the folder toward her. Consider it repayment of a debt that extends beyond our financial arrangement. Jolene hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. Finally, curiosity won out, and she opened the folder. Inside were several documents. An analysis of Illinois divorce law regarding separation agreements, and subsequently discovered assets information about an exclusive arts college in Europe, with a renowned architecture program, and most surprisingly, a detailed business plan for a consultation firm specializing in crisis recovery for businesses facing catastrophic setbacks. What is this? Jolene asked, holding up the business plan. An idea sparked by our conversations. Caspian's expression remained neutral, but Jolene detected a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. You have a unique perspective, someone who built a successful business, experienced a catastrophic failure, and is now rebuilding. That knowledge is valuable. Jolene flipped through the meticulously prepared projections, market analysis, and potential client profiles. The concept was compelling, using her experience to help other businesses navigate crisis and recovery, a way to transform her personal disaster into professional wisdom. This is thorough, she said finally. Unsure how to feel about him developing such a detailed plan without her knowledge. I have excellent analysts, he replied simply, and considerable experience recognizing untapped potential. Is that what I am, untapped potential? The question came out more sharply than she intended. You're many things, Jolene Bennett, he said quietly, most of which have nothing to do with business opportunities or blood type. The air between them shifted, charged with unspoken currents. Before Jolene could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Dr. Dubois for Caspian's scheduled examination. Relieved and frustrated in equal measure by the interruption, Jolene excused herself, taking the folder with her. Back in her suite, Jolene spread the contents across the coffee table, examining each document more carefully. The divorce analysis confirmed what her own attorney had suggested. Sterling's claim on the Thorne payment was tenuous at best, especially given the explicit division of assets in their separation agreement. The information about the arts college revealed it offered a scholarship program for international students with exceptional portfolios, something Celeste might qualify for with her remarkable design work. But it was the business plan that kept drawing her attention. Eventuality. Consulting the proposed name with the tagline, Beyond Crisis Management. The concept was elegant in its simplicity, leveraging her experience to help businesses navigate catastrophic setbacks, not just surviving but emerging stronger. Had Caspian somehow extracted this vision from their conversations? Or had he recognized something in her that she hadn't yet acknowledged in herself? The thought was both flattering and unsettling. Her phone rang, interrupting her contemplation. It was Celeste. "Mum, have you checked your email today?" she asked, without preamble, excitement vibrating in her voice. "No. Why?" "I got the strangest message from the International College of Design in Geneva. They're inviting me to submit my portfolio for a full scholarship program. They said they're expanding their search for exceptional North American talent and got my name from a recommendation." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Did you have something to do with this?" Jolene glanced at the college brochure still lying open on her table. Not directly, she hedged. Was it him? Mr. Thorne? Celeste was too perceptive by half. "Mum, is something going on between you two? He's a patient whose life I helped save through a biological coincidence," Jolene replied, avoiding the question. and he's apparently prone to grand gestures of gratitude. Uh-huh. Celeste's skepticism was evident even across an ocean. Well, whatever's happening, I'm submitting my portfolio. This school is incredible. Their architecture program is ranked among the top 5 globally. After they hung up, Jolene sat staring at the business plan again. Caspian's grand gesture was far more than mere gratitude. He had offered not just financial compensation, but a potential future for Celeste, and for her. A path forward that built upon her past, rather than trying to erase it. The question was why? What did Caspian Thorne gain from investing in her future beyond their blood arrangement? Was this another business transaction to him? A philanthropy project? Or something more personal that neither of them was quite ready to name? As twilight settled over the Alps, turning the snow-capped peaks to gold and then dusky purple, Jolene made a decision. Tomorrow she would confront Caspian about his motivations and perhaps finally examine her own. The next morning, Jolene awoke to a text from Eleanor. Emergency with CT overnight. Stable now, but rough few hours. Thought you should know. Her heart stuttered as she immediately called Eleanor. What happened? Post-surgical complication, Eleanor explained. Fluid around the heart. They had to perform an emergency procedure to drain it. He's okay now, but it was touch and go for a while. Why didn't anyone call me, Jolene? Demanded, already pulling clothes from the closet. A slight pause. He specifically asked them not to disturb you. That stubborn, infuriating man. Jolene dressed quickly and made her way to the medical wing where she found Darius pacing outside his father's room, looking rumpled and exhausted in what were clearly yesterday's clothes. Mrs. Bennet, he acknowledged stiffly. I'm surprised they notified you. They didn't. Jolene replied, choosing not to elaborate on her source. How is he? Stabilized. Dr. Dubois says the immediate danger has passed. A muscle twitched in Darius's jaw. Father is asking for you. Actually has been since he regained consciousness, despite my presence at his bedside all night. The thinly veiled resentment in his tone might have offended Jolene a week ago. Now she simply felt sympathy for this young man watching his formidable father's mortality manifest so starkly while simultaneously feeling replaced in the sick room by a stranger. Your father values you greatly, Jolene said, softening her tone. He spoke just yesterday about your exceptional management of the Asian operations. Surprise flickered across Darius's face before his professional mask returned. Did he? He did, Jolene confirmed. Though he also mentioned your shared tendency to see the world primarily through risk assessment and asset protection. A reluctant smile tugged at Darius's lips. That sounds like father. Perhaps we could both visit him? Jolene suggested an olive branch of sorts. I'm sure he'd appreciate seeing us cooperate, rather than compete for his attention. Darius studied Jolene with new interest, reminding her strongly of his father's penetrating gaze. You're not what I expected, Mrs. Bennet. Jolene, please. And what did you expect? Someone more opportunistic? He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Your situation made you seem potentially predatory. My situation. A middle-aged woman with sudden financial troubles, suddenly valuable to a wealthy man. He shrugged apologetically. You must admit, from an outside perspective, it looked like I was taking advantage of your vulnerable father, Jolene finished for him. Despite the fact that I came into this situation completely unaware of my blood's value, and your father's team sought me out, not the other way around. Darius had the decency to look abashed. When you put it that way, let's go see your father, Jolene said, ending the uncomfortable conversation. I have a few choice words for him about not notifying me of medical emergencies. Caspian looked alarmingly frail, his skin ashen against the white hospital linens. Various tubes and monitors once again attached to his body, but his eyes remained sharp lighting. With something that might have been pleasure when he saw Jolene enter with Darius. A united front, he observed his voice weaker than yesterday, but still carrying that sardonic edge. Should I be concerned? Absolutely, Jolene replied, taking the chair beside his bed while Darius remained standing. We formed an alliance to enforce proper rest and recovery protocols, which apparently you've been ignoring. Physician, heal thyself, Darius added with unexpected warmth. Or at least listen to your actual physicians. Caspian's gaze moved between them, assessing. An interesting development. What's interesting, Jolene countered, is that you specifically requested I not be notified about your medical emergency. Care to explain? A shadow of his usual wry smile appeared. You needed your rest, and there was nothing you could have done. That's not your decision to make, Jolene said firmly. Not after everything we've been through. Darius cleared his throat. I should give you two some privacy. No stay, Caspian said, surprising them both. What I need to discuss concerns both of you. He shifted, slightly wincing. Last night's episode was a reminder of my mortality more acute than I'd prefer. There are matters I need to address, contingencies to arrange. Father, you're going to recover fully, Darius insisted, moving closer to the bed. Eventually, perhaps. But recovery is clearly more complicated than we anticipated. Caspian's gaze fixed on Jolene. Jolene, regarding the business proposal I showed you yesterday. I'd like to expedite it. Expedite it? Jolene repeated, confused. Thorn Banking Group has numerous clients who have faced catastrophic setbacks, financial, reputational, operational. Your experience could be invaluable to them. He glanced at Darius. I've allocated initial funding for Eventuality Consulting as a subsidiary venture with Darius, overseeing the financial structure while you develop the methodology and client approach. Darius blinked in surprise. This is the first I'm hearing of this, Father, because I've only just decided. Caspian's tone brooked no argument despite his weakened state. Jolene's perspective on failure and recovery is unique. Combined with our financial resources and client relationships, it represents a significant opportunity. Jolene sat back, processing the implications. So you want me to work for Thorn Banking Group, with Caspian corrected as a partner in a new venture, one that benefits from our infrastructure, while maintaining its independent approach and expertise. He turned to Darius. The proposal documents are in my private safe. Silas Thorn knows the combination. Darius hesitated, clearly torn between professional curiosity about this new business direction and concern about his father's health. We should discuss this when you're stronger. We're discussing it now, Caspian said with a flash of his usual authority, because I may not have the luxury of perfect timing. The blunt acknowledgement of his mortality silenced them both momentarily. Finally, Jolene leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. Why are you doing this, Caspian? The truth. His eyes, sunken with exhaustion, but still piercingly intelligent, held hers. Because some debts can't be paid with money alone. Because talent shouldn't be wasted due to circumstance. Because you rebuilt me with your blood, and I would offer the same opportunity for rebuilding in return. The raw honesty in his voice struck Jolene deeply. This wasn't merely a business proposition or philanthropic gesture. It was something more personal, a recognition of shared experience despite their vastly different circumstances. Darius, watching this exchange with evident fascination, cleared his throat. I'll retrieve those documents and give them a proper review. If you're serious about this venture, Father, it deserves thorough diligence. After he left, silence settled between Caspian and Jolene. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter. You haven't answered, Jolene. Would you consider it, did you? Jolene studied him, this complex man, who had upended her life as completely as her blood had transformed his. I'm not certain I'm ready to build something new from the ashes of my old life, especially something so closely tied to you and your family. Because of my son's suspicions, or your own, both perhaps. Jolene hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. I'm not entirely sure what's happening between us, Caspian. Whatever it is, it complicates a business relationship. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Yes, it does. And yet you're proposing one anyway. I'm providing an opportunity. What you build with it professionally or otherwise remains your choice. He shifted again, a grimace of pain crossing his features. Last night, when they were rushing me back to surgery, I had a moment of perfect clarity. Do you know what I regretted most in that moment? Jolene shook her head. Not the business deals I've missed, or the wealth I've accumulated, or even the relationships I've neglected. What I regretted was the possibility of not seeing what you would do next, how you would rebuild your life with or without the resources I could offer. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a strangely specific regret for a man facing potential death. The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them seemed ready to fully articulate. Before Jolene could respond, Dr. Dubois entered with a team of nurses for Caspian's examination. "We'll need privacy, Mrs. Bennet," he said apologetically. Jolene rose, unexpectedly reluctant to leave. "I'll think about your proposal," she told Caspian. He replied simply. "But don't overthink it. You have excellent instincts, Jolene. Trust them." As she walked back to her suite, his words echoed in her mind. Trust my instincts. The same instincts that had led her to build a successful business only to watch it collapse. The same instincts that had kept her in a marriage with Sterling far longer than she should have. The same instincts that now pulled her toward a complex entanglement with a billionaire banker whose blood literally contained her own. Yet beneath the doubt and confusion, a small voice of certainty whispered, whatever was happening with Caspian Thorne. Whatever came next, it represented the first genuine path forward she'd glimpsed since her world collapsed 6 months ago. Not a return to what was lost, but something entirely new. Something built on the unexpected foundation of two broken people, finding value in each other beyond biology or finance. Trust my instincts. Perhaps it was finally time to try. 3 weeks after Caspian's surgery, Jolene stood at the window of her Chicago apartment. Not the penthouse she'd lost, but a comfortable 2-bedroom overlooking the lake in a quieter neighborhood. The first portion of the Thorne payment had arrived shortly after they returned from Switzerland, enough to clear her most pressing debts and secure this modest but pleasant new beginning. The apartment was sparsely furnished. She'd started fresh rather than trying to reclaim pieces of her former life. The walls remained mostly bare, waiting for new memories to fill them rather than echoing past glories. Only her desk held remnants of before a small crystal award from the Chamber of Commerce recognizing elegance by Jolene's contribution to the city's hospitality industry, and a framed photo of Celeste from her high school graduation. Her phone chimed with a message from Celeste herself. "Apartment hunting in Geneva tomorrow. Can't believe I got the scholarship. Call you after to show you the options." Jolene smiled, her heart swelling with pride. The International College of Design had not only accepted Celeste's portfolio, but awarded her their prestigious Global Innovator Scholarship, a genuine recognition of her talent. Regardless of Caspian's initial connection, her daughter was rebuilding her future on her own terms, just as Jolene was attempting to do with hers. The eventuality. Consulting proposals sat open on her dining table, surrounded by notes market research and potential client profiles she'd been reviewing. After weeks of consideration and numerous video calls with Darius and the Thorne legal team, Jolene decided to move forward with the venture with several key modifications to maintain her independence. Instead of a Thorne subsidiary eventuality, would be her own company with Thorne Banking Group as a minority investor and strategic partner. She would control the methodology and client approach while benefiting from their financial resources and networks. The arrangement preserved her autonomy while acknowledging the practical advantages of their support. Her phone rang. Not Celeste, but Silas Thorne. Jolene. He greeted her, his tone warmer than during their first meeting. Their shared experiences in Switzerland had transformed him from Caspian's formal representative to something approaching a colleague. I've just received the signed partnership agreements from our legal department. Everything is proceeding as scheduled. And Caspi and Jolene asked the question that always hovered beneath their professional discussions. How is his recovery progressing? Steadily, Silas Thorne replied. He's working half days from his residence in Zurich, much to Dr. Dubois's continued frustration. Some patients are more cooperative than others, Jolene observed dryly. Indeed, a pause, then. He's asked about your visit next month. Should I confirm those arrangements? Her upcoming trip to Switzerland, ostensibly for final blood tests and partnership meetings, hung between them. Its personal implications unacknowledged, but understood. Yes, Jolene confirmed. The dates we discussed still work. After they hung up, Jolene returned to the window, watching twilight settle over Lake Michigan. The water reflected the deepening blue of the sky, reminding her of those quiet evenings on her balcony in Switzerland, contemplating an uncertain future that had since gained definition and purpose. A knock at her door interrupted her reverie. She wasn't expecting visitors, but the building had good security, so she opened it without concern and found Sterling standing there immaculately dressed as always. Jolene, he greeted her with the winning smile that had once made her heart flutter. Now it simply reminded her of a salesman's practiced charm. Your new place is lovely, though the security downstairs is quite persistent. That's rather the point of security, Jolene replied coolly, not inviting him in. What do you want, Sterling? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I thought we should talk. Our attorneys are making this process more contentious than necessary. Our attorneys are doing their jobs. Mine is protecting my interests, and yours is trying to claim money he has no legal right to. Sterling's smile tightened. There's no need for hostility. We were married for 25 years. Surely we can discuss this reasonably. We could have discussed many things reasonably. Jolene agreed. When my business collapsed, when I needed support. When our daughter had to leave college, you chose to walk away instead. I made a mistake, he admitted with practiced contrition. I panicked, seeing everything we'd built together crumbling so suddenly. I didn't handle it well. And now that I have money again, you've had a change of heart. How convenient. His expression hardened slightly. That's unfair, Jolene. I've had months to reflect on my actions. Coincidentally, the same months during which news of my Golden Blood and Thorne connection appeared in the financial press. Jolene leaned against the doorframe, studying the man she'd once loved. Did you know Celeste received a prestigious scholarship to study in Europe? No thanks to you. I heard he said surprising her. Beatrice mentioned it when I called her last week. Of course, he'd maintained contact with her sister. Beatrice had always been slightly in awe of Sterling's polished charm. I'm proud of her, he continued. She's always been talented. Despite herself, Jolene softened slightly. Whatever Sterling's failings as a husband, he'd generally been a good father when present. Yes, she has. Taking advantage of the momentary thaw, he pressed further. Could I come in just for a few minutes? I have a proposal that might resolve our situation amicably. Against her better judgment, Jolene stepped aside, allowing him into her new space. He surveyed the apartment with barely concealed assessment, no doubt calculating its value compared to their former penthouse. I see you've started fresh, he commented, noting the minimal furnishings. In more ways than one. Jolene gestured to the couch, but remained standing herself. What's your proposal? Sterling sat, crossing his legs casually as if they were discussing dinner plans rather than divorce terms. I'm prepared to drop all claims to the Thorne compensation in exchange for a one-time settlement. A clean break, no further legal entanglements. How generous, Jolene replied, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. And how much would this clean break cost me? He named a figure that, while substantial, was far less than his lawyers had been demanding. Under different circumstances, Jolene might have considered it simply to end the conflict. But something had fundamentally changed in her since that day at the donation center. No, she said simply. His confident expression faltered. No, your claim has no legal merit, Sterling. The separation agreement clearly divided our assets. The Thorne arrangement came months after you left when we were living completely separate lives. Our divorce isn't finalized because your attorneys have been deliberately delaying it. My blood, my arrangement, my compensation. Jolene interrupted, her voice clear and steady. You abandoned me when I had nothing. You don't get to return now that I have something. He stood, the charming facade cracking to reveal the calculation beneath. This new confidence doesn't suit you, Jolene. Caspian Thorne may have put stars in your eyes with his billions and business opportunities, but you're out of your depth. You always have been in the financial realm, and yet here I am rebuilding while you're reduced to knocking on my door begging for handouts. The words were harsh, but delivered calmly without the emotional turmoil such a confrontation would have triggered months ago. My attorneys will contact yours with our final position. This conversation is over. After showing him out, Jolene returned to the window, surprised by her own composure. 6 months ago, Sterling's abandonment had devastated her. Now his reappearance barely ruffled her equilibrium. Her phone rang again. Caspian this time, as if conjured by Sterling's accusations. Is this a bad time? He asked. When she answered, the connection crystal clear, despite the ocean between them. Actually, it's perfect timing, Jolene replied, settling into her reading chair. Sterling just left. Ah. A world of understanding in that single syllable. And how did that encounter go? Better than expected. For me, at least. Probably not for his ego. Caspian's soft chuckle warmed Jolene despite the distance. I wish I could have witnessed it. You're quite formidable when properly motivated, a quality we apparently share. Jolene observed. Silas Thorne says you're working half days against medical advice. Silas Thorne reports too thoroughly, he grumbled though, without real annoyance. How are the partnership arrangements proceeding? They discussed business for several minutes. The structure of eventuality consulting potential early clients' marketing approaches before drifting into more personal territory. Have you decided yet? He asked finally, the question she'd been expecting. Jolene gazed out at the darkening lake, considering her answer carefully. Caspian had presented her with a secondary proposal alongside the business venture, one far more personal in nature. After his recovery, he'd suggested spending 6 months in Chicago ostensibly to help launch Eventuality, but with the unspoken purpose of exploring whatever connection had developed between them. Yes, she said, having finally reached the decision during Sterling's visit. I think we should see what this is between us, without the extraordinary circumstances of hospitals and billion-dollar banking empires clouding the issue. And if it's nothing, he asked, a rare vulnerability in his voice, then we'll have a successful business partnership and an unusual friendship. With a remarkable origin story, Jolene replied. But I don't think it's nothing, Caspian. Neither do I. The simple admission carried more weight than flowery declarations might have. 1 month until your visit. I've scheduled the follow-up blood tests with Dr. Dubois for Monday morning, which leaves us the rest of the week for less medical interactions. They spoke for nearly an hour, more discussing everything from Celeste's apartment hunt in Geneva to Caspian's plans for gradually transferring more operational control to Darius. There was an ease to their conversation that belied the complexities of their situation. The age difference, the geographical distance, the vast disparity in their financial worlds. Even with Jolene's improved circumstances. After they hung up, Jolene moved to her desk and picked up the small vial she kept. There, a token Dr. Dubois had given her before she left Switzerland, containing a tiny sample of her golden blood, preserved in a clear resin pendant. In the lamplight, it glowed a deep, rich crimson, the physical embodiment of the extraordinary value she'd carried within her, all along unrecognized, until a moment of desperate need revealed it. She returned to the dining table and reached for a blank notebook. At the top of the first page, she wrote, Eventuality Beyond Crisis Management. Then below it, Chapter 1, The Value Within. Her story wasn't just about blood or money or even unexpected second chances. It was about discovering that true worth exists, independent of external validation or circumstance. A lesson she hoped to share with others, facing their own moments of collapse and reinvention. Outside, the Chicago skyline sparkled against the night sky. As beautiful from this new vantage point as it had been from her penthouse, just different like her life itself. Irrevocably changed, yet somehow more authentic than before. Not defined by what she'd lost, but by what she'd found within herself. Golden blood, yes, but also resilience, clarity, and the courage to begin again. Not an ending, but a continuation on her own terms, in her own way, with unexpected allies and opportunities she could never have imagined when she walked into that donation center seeking $40 and found millions instead. Jolene's journey is a powerful testament to the enduring truth that our greatest assets are often unseen, residing not in possessions or titles, but in the depths of our spirit and the unique essence of who we are. When the external scaffolding of her life crumbled, her business, her marriage, her financial security, she was forced to confront an identity stripped bare. Yet in that vulnerability, she discovered an extraordinary literal value within her own biology, a golden blood that not only rescued her from despair, but opened doors to a future she could never have dreamed of. More profound than the millions, however, was the rediscovery of her own resilience, her acumen, and her capacity for genuine human connection. Her story reminds us that worth isn't bestowed by others or dictated by circumstance. It's an inherent quality, waiting to be recognized, nurtured, and ultimately shared. It teaches us that even in the face of betrayal and profound loss, a new beginning is always possible. One built not on reclaiming what was lost, but on embracing the authentic, powerful self that endures. If you saw yourself in Jolene's journey of unexpected self-discovery and triumphant rebuilding, subscribe for more stories of resilience and reinvention. May your own path be illuminated by the golden light of your intrinsic worth, leading you to peace and purpose.